Good afternoon. My name is Suzanne Rivera. I'm an associate professor of bioethics and also the vice president for research and technology management at Case Western Reserve University in Cleveland, Ohio. I'm going to be focusing on the ethical, legal, and social considerations of advancing these kinds of technologies and try to tie up a bit themes that you have heard the other members of the panel talking about in order to sort of summarize why we think the approach we're taking is novel and important. In the field of bioethics, there's an established tradition of applying what we call an LC approach to thinking about science, medicine, and technology. LC is an acronym that stands for ethical, legal, and social implications. If you're from Europe, you may know it as ELSA for ethics, legal, and social aspects. And in Canada, it's ELSP, or ethical, legal, and social policy. You could think of the LC methodology as a transdisciplinary approach that a subset of bioethicists use to explore moral questions raised by scientific and technological advances. The work of bioethicists in this camp might be described as applied, as opposed to those whose work is more theoretical. So as a shorthand, we can think of LC as simply meaning examining the human impacts of science, medicine, and technology, both for individuals and for society. Considerations like many that you have heard spoken about today, like equity, inclusion, privacy, access, risk of physical and emotional harm, potential for nefarious use by bad actors, legal liability, need for regulation, hacking, how the technology might change human capabilities, and even whether these changes might have the potential to change how we define humanity itself. I hope what you've seen here today is a glimpse of that LC approach in action. It's an approach that's centered in the human, and I'm not talking about an exclusively healthy, white, educated, heteronormative male prototype of the human body against which women, people of color, poor people, queer-identified people, and others are treated as deviations from the standard. I'm talking about an inclusive, expansive, justice-oriented definition of humanity. Although it could be possible to develop, test, and deploy human-machine connections without a deep LC approach, I'm here to argue that it would be a bad practice, bad for the science and bad for people, irresponsible and fundamentally unethical. Failing to deeply examine LC considerations leads to products that don't work for their intended audiences, and products that create serious, adverse, unintended consequences. As David Ortiz, the senior diversity and inclusion consultant for Oracle, said at a conference I attended last week, "What you build without us ain't for us." Think, for example, about the automatic sinks and soap dispensers that have difficulty recognizing darker skin tones. Who was on that design team? It probably didn't look like this panel. Also, think about the NASA spacesuits that originally were designed for the dimensions and needs only of men's bodies. And by the way, while I'm at it, can I have a round of applause for the courageous female astronauts who just completed that breathtaking spacewalk on Friday? That wouldn't have been possible without adjusting those suits. Our team at the Human Fusions Institute is approaching technology development with a decidedly LC strategy, an approach that puts humans at the center and considers specifically what aspects of humanity are essential for the successful development of new digital technologies. With a focus on what is fundamentally human, we can think more deeply about the ethical, legal, and social dimensions of technology innovation. Doing the work this way requires transdisciplinary teams assembled to think about the technology we need and how to develop it ethically in ways that benefit society. It also requires deep engagement with stakeholders like Brandon, who would benefit from the technology. And that means working with constituents, not doing things to them. It means asking questions like, what problem are we trying to solve? Who would this solution help? And also, who could this harm? What is the best way to test this idea? Who else should we ask about this before taking the next step? And what pitfalls haven't we thought of yet? It's time-consuming to work this way because it requires the building of trust among people and groups who don't normally work together. That means folks need to learn to speak across disciplinary idioms and across organizational lines. And as many of you surely have experienced, we in the Academy are not especially skilled at working across organizational lines. I'm making a moral argument here, and it's based on the theory of virtue ethics. Even though it's challenging, the rewards of this approach are significant and essential. They result in technology innovations that can restore, or in some cases, enhance human capabilities. And while consequentialists might focus on utility, that is, whether the technology developed this way is more effective, or the simple math of asking whether it might help more people without figuring out which people are being helped. And deontologists might say we have a moral duty to consider the challenges of technology development in such a way that puts humans at the center. Our team is striving to cultivate a mindset or character that contributes to human flourishing by deeply honoring and cultivating the dignity of all people, respect for human differences like cultural traditions, languages, abilities, religious beliefs, and also the principle of fairness and how existing structures of inequality can be dismantled or reduced through our work. Does this mean we always know the right answer to every question with ethical dimensions? No, you already heard a joke about us arguing good-naturedly last night about our presentation. There are times as a team where we will disagree about how much risk is acceptable given the likely benefits of an intervention. But we need the courage to speak up about our concerns, and we each have to accept a certain amount of discomfort in conversations during which our own personal or disciplinary blind spots are called out. We also may have different levels of tolerance for hazards such as equipment malfunction, hacking, or other kinds of privacy violations, and myriad additional complications, all topics about which reasonable people with different disciplinary training and personal perspectives may disagree. But this is where the LC approach provides a scaffolding that enables us to develop technology from the standpoint that more heads, more disciplines, more personal experiences are better than one, and that by considering our various points of view, we are more likely to arrive at a solution that contributes to human flourishing than if we were to stay in our personal and professional lanes. Yes, the work is slower this way because meaningful engagement is time-consuming, but the results are better. They're better for people, better for society, and we think better for humanity. Thank you.